So good evening, ladies, and welcome to the webinar. It's really fantastic to have you with me this evening. So thank you so much for joining me. Really great to have you online. There's quite a few of you here tonight, so welcome. The topic we're going to be talking about tonight is love, trust, and safety in relationships. And it's really an interesting topic because it's one that comes out of the Be Unstoppable program that we've just launched. And the Be Unstoppable program is really about, obviously, trust, love, and safety in relationships. It's about personal empowerment, managing stress, emotional resilience as a woman, et cetera, et cetera. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go through the program. But at the end of the day, welcome, and it's lovely to have you with me this evening. So when we talk about love, trust, and safety in relationships, here's a key question for you. Would you like to be in a great relationship where you feel comfortable and happy? Would you like to feel comfortable that you can raise topics with your partner without a defensive attitude coming your way? Would you like to know that you can feel safe in your relationship at any time? Would you like to be in a relationship that has none or little drama? I always laugh at this question because maybe it's just because when people come to see me, by the time they do, often their relationships are struggling. But there seems to be a lot of drama in relationships at the moment, and I don't know whether it's just at the moment or that's how it is. But would you like to be in a relationship that actually has no drama? Be in a calm relationship where you value each other, are loyal, and really want to be together? Just want to go back one slide here. One of the things I just wanted to say to all of you on the line tonight is that even though this particular relationship looks, I guess, at a more intimate relationship around, love, trust, and safety, I think what would be really interesting here is that for most of the stuff I'll be talking to you about this evening, it's actually really these kind of principles are relevant in most of our relationships. So, for example, if you take the first topic, would you like to be in a great relationship where you feel comfortable and happy? That doesn't necessarily mean with your partner. It could be with your children or with your mother or your father or, even at work, for example. So the second one might be, would you like to feel comfortable that you can raise topics with your team colleague without a defensive attitude? Would you like to know that you can feel safe in any relationship, really? So even though I'm sort of focusing more, I guess, on intimate partnerships, I'm also talking more about relationships overall because all of these things really actually, relate to these. This particular slide really is more around the sort of intimate relationships. And what I'm talking about is that very often in the relationships that I see, particularly with women, is that the problem is that many of us are in relationships that struggle. Not all of us, obviously, but many of us are. Or they simply just don't work. I can't begin to tell you how many times, and I think it's the right reasons why mostly women want to stay in relationships, and I think that's really admirable. But very often those relationships that I'm witnessing are just not working, no matter how much she tries. And very often what's interesting to watch is that the less the relationship works, the harder she tries. The harder she tries, the greater the imbalance that's created in the relationship, and therefore the greater chance that ultimately in the long term, because this imbalance, it's not going to last. Or they feel like they're on a roller coaster. How many times do, women talk to me or come and see me about their relationships and just say, I feel as if I'm on a roller coaster all the time, Karen. One day it's up, one day it's down, or more importantly, one moment it's up and then one moment it's down. So that kind of roller coaster feeling that is absolutely exhausting in relationships, which really at the end of the day aren't good for anybody. And the problem is that many women actually live in these relationships and they find it very difficult to get out of them. And I'm not suggesting in any stage during this conference or this webinar that any women should get out of any relationship whatsoever. The intention behind my monthly webinars is to give women the opportunity to really think about the topics that I cover, really think about whether there are areas that they could improve or things that they could do differently, and really think about if you as a woman are living productively or if there are things that you could be doing differently to live more happily, I guess, and in a more fruitful and productive way. So maybe it's time to see your relationship, I guess, through fresh eyes, because very often with relationships, he or she will say to me, if only she changed, I would be happy, or if only he did this, I would be happy. The bottom line, ladies, is at the end of the day is that you have no control over any relationship that you're in. None of us do. The only people over whom we have control obviously, is ourselves. So often when I'm working relationships or with relationships, I say, if for things to change, first I must change. So if you're wanting to change something in your relationship, then it's about looking at what it is that potentially you need to do differently. Because very often if you change one thing, even sometimes if it's a slight thing, if you change something, very often the dynamics of the relationship changes. So I just want you to hold on to that thought for a moment. Just remember, very often that if you change, then often the relationship changes. So it's a really important point to think about that. So the questions are, what can I do to live in a better relationship? You know, those are the questions I'm sure that probably the many women that are on this webinar tonight, you're on this relationship webinar because obviously you're either curious on how to have a good relationship, or you want to improve the one you're in, or you're studying and you want to know the theory, or you really want to think about getting out of the relationship, or you're thinking about what can I do to live in a better one. I can't change them, so what can I change about me or my behavior? And I think that's a key aspect of relationships. As I said, you can't change them, but the only thing you can do is change what you do. Is this really where I want to be? So many times women ask me, Karen, do I want to be here? And obviously I can't answer the question. But I think the issue really is, we're not getting younger, we're getting older, and are we in the relationships, whatever those relationships are, that are good for us? Are they, do they make us happy? Do they make us thrive? Or we found that they kind of drag us down a lot of the time? And I think that as we get older very often, it's really good to think about these things and to think about what we really want in our lives, and are there things that, we could be doing differently? How can I create intimacy and comfort in my relationship is a classic question I get. And intimacy is a very interesting thing, essentially. Largely just, excuse me, so I can give you some of the theory. Intimacy very often, ladies, is an outcome. In other words, if you do this and that and this, then generally the relationship can get intimacy. And I'm talking about, not necessarily sexual intimacy, but I'm talking about emotional intimacy as well. The ability to, be open and honest in a relationship, share your deepest, darkest fears, knowing that the person with whom you are sharing those feelings is going to value and trust and keep those feelings that you have loyal to them and loyal to the relationship. What I always do with my webinars, and I'm not always able to fit anybody in, but I always give you the opportunity to have a one-on-one session with me later on in the week. If you are motivated by any of the things I'm talking about, or if you would like more information about any of the stuff I'm talking about, or you need some help in some way. So a little bit about me. I won't bore you with the details. My name is Karen Walsh. I've been coaching women for 25 years. I own a business. I do a lot of leadership work. For some of you on the line, you know me. I travel internationally, so I work in Africa, Fiji, and Australia. I do a lot of coaching. I used to university lecture, and I'm a psych by training. I work, as I said, Africa, Fiji, and Australia. I've worked with families, marriages, and individuals for many, many years. So very au fait with, how relationships are and what to do to make them better. Families, work a lot of things with depression, resilience, anxiety. I do lots of writing and speaking, and I do lots of different things. I coached one of my favorite career highlights. One of the CEOs I coached was the CEO of the year, 2017. By the way, ladies, she's a woman, so I'm really happy about that. I won a couple of awards along the way and do some public speaking. But mainly, my work in women is driven by helping them lead the lives I believe women were born to lead, free from fear and limiting beliefs that they will never get to where they want to go. And of course, I call this my God's work, really, when I think about all of the stuff that's happening around domestic violence and, the Me Too movement and gender inequality and all the stuff that are going on around the world with regards to the inequality of women. It's something that I'm very, very firm on and very, committed to helping women grow and thrive and live wonderful lives. So that's just a little bit about me, some of the clients I've worked with over the years. Absolutely love my work, and some of the people with whom I've worked. So God bless them all. They're all special and wonderful. This is, I included this picture, and I think it's quite a funny picture, but it's quite an important one because so often I hear women saying to me, I am so tired of trying. And I think that's a really important point around women and relationships. And I'm not just talking about serious, intimate relationships. I think one of the things I find very important about working with women is that generally women try so hard. I'll give you an example. I was running a training program last year sometime, and I was running it in rural New South Wales in a place called Tamworth. Now, some of you on the line are from Fiji, so I'm just explaining it's from rural New South Wales. And there was a woman who arrived at about 9:30. The training started at 9. And I thought, that's a bit strange because normally, if it's 9, I like people to be on time. Anyway, by about 9:45, she was asleep on her desk. So I let it go, which I wouldn't normally, but I let it go. And at 10:30 or whatever time it was, we had the tea break. And I sort of woke her up and I said, are you okay? And I just sort of was a bit concerned about her. And the issue I'm sharing with you is that she'd actually traveled 6 hours to come to the training because she was really interested in the topic, which I thought was really lovely. But the reason I share that with you was that she was going to drive back another 6 hours that night. She'd got up early to prepare the food for her children and to cook her husband's dinner and to make sure that the cat was fed and the dog was looked after. And I just thought to myself that, women are so, we try so hard. We do so many things. The cook, the bottle washer, the coach, the counselor, the friend, the confidant, the taxi driver. We're everything. And I think we just try so hard. And I think one of the reasons I want to just raise this is that I think sometimes, ladies, I think we try too hard in our relationships. And what I mean by that is that we put more effort in than our partner does. And just remember something, is that the more effort you put in, it means then that by definition, the less they have to. And the less effort other people put into relationships, the less they will. Therefore, it becomes in many ways a very lopsided relationship. So the Empowering Women to Thrive program, which this particular webinar is part of that program. Just because there's some of you on the line I don't know, quickly I'll describe to you what it is. So I originally wrote Empowering Women to Thrive, comes out of my work obviously with women. Initially came out of my work with domestic violence. So I've been working in domestic violence, or I was working with domestic violence for many, many years. And I sadly have to say that I've probably seen it all. So murder, homicide, suicide, incest, domestic violence. And it's just been a really, really difficult road in terms of seeing women so, in spaces where they shouldn't be. And so I think low in many ways. But unfortunately, now that there's been, the lid taken off domestic violence, well, you know as I do, I don't have to give you the statistics around women and domestic violence. But even though the Empowering Women to Thrive came out of that initially, the actual Empowering Women to Thrive program is not just focused on domestic violence. I think that's a really important point. The Empowering Women to Thrive is to help women at all levels of organization, society, relationships across the world learn how to thrive and do it really well. And so what it is that we've just launched a 9-stage online women's program. It's called Be Unstoppable. I'll tell you a little bit more about that just now. Really exciting, many women going through it already. We have an Empowering Women to Thrive at Work, which is a 12-stage face-to-face program. We've just run that in the Master Builders Association. Boy, was that fun, I must tell you. Master Builders Association, probably the most male-dominated industry in Australia. And we ran this program with 20 women from the construction industry, and it was just fantastic. We do women's retreats, we do monthly meetups, we do coaching, webinars, so get involved. The more women we have, I say, the better. I always say one woman at a time. So welcome. Quick thing about Be Unstoppable. We believe it's the only program of its kind in the world today. We can't find anything like it. It was written for women around the world by a woman who understands women. I actually wrote it, but it was transcribed or converted into an online program by strangely, a high school teacher of mine who I found after many years of searching for, and then recently uploaded by a techo in Boston. So I'll explain a little bit more about the program in a moment for you, but it's a really exciting program and we're so proud of it. That's the register now link, empoweringwomentothrive.com. The program really was initially written because I've been asked by many, many women over the years to do something online, and I always sort of threatened I would, but never got round to it. I actually did decide to write the program, and I don't normally share this, but I will share it with you because you are online, and I'm talking about love, trust, and safety in relationships. It's a long story, and I don't want to get into the details here, but I was involved in a familicide where a man wiped out his family, and I was asked to sort of pick up the pieces, which I did, which was extraordinarily difficult. But the reason why I share that with you, it was after that, when I was actually coming home from the incident, that I sort of looked heavenwards and said, what do you want me to do? Sort of looking for some kind of salvation, and I just got this online program in my mind. So with that in mind, I wrote Be Unstoppable, which was launched a month ago. Let's talk a little bit now about women in relationships. When we talk about women in relationships, I honestly say to you that I think many women don't know what a healthy relationship looks like. And that's not being critical, that's not being nasty, that's not being mean. I think many of us have relationships based on our parents' relationships. Some of us think our relationships are perfect because they're based on, what mum and dad had. And I can't tell you very often that's not, nothing further from the truth. Others of us base our relationship on mum and dad who did have a good relationship. But the times are changing, and I think the world is a very different world now to the world it was then. And so ultimately, I think we need to really rethink relationships. We need to rethink about, so what does a good relationship look like, and can I have one? And the reason I say that is because many women with whom I'm working tell me they're in a great relationship, and I'm thinking, so how don't you realize that, the lack of intimacy or the distance in your relationship or even the abuse in your relationship is not healthy? And I guess part of the reason why I wanted to run this webinar is that there's a misunderstanding, an unhealthy, uninsightful understanding of what a good relationship looks like. And the truth is that many women are not living in good relationships. Not all, of course not all, but many women are not living in good relationships, and many of those women try harder to make them good. And as I said earlier, when they try harder, they become more lopsided, which then makes them more dysfunctional. I see this time and time again. Often women put their needs last and the needs of their partner or family first. And that comes back to what the Dalai Lama says, the world will be ruled by women. Yes, it will, and yes, it is, I would say. However, I think one of the key things around this is that, we are the givers of life. We're the bearers of children. We are the people who ensure the generations in the future are being born. But part of that nurturing role then is that means that we actually come last and other people come first. And, I'm not talking about the cultural constructs of any relationship. I'm really just talking about how relationships are really around the world. And essentially what you've got is that as nurturers, as the bearers of children, our role is to provide the safe, nurturing, loving home. But very often the problem with that is that it's at our expense. It's at our cost, and that's where the problem lies. What I find with many women is that we want peace at all costs. I don't want to fight. I don't want to argue. Whatever they want, they can have. And I think what happens with that kind of concept around relationships is that, again, it comes back to that gender inequality, where you've got one person in the relationship who's dominant and the other person who's more submissive. And it doesn't matter what type of relationship, whether it's same-sex couples or opposite-sex couples, it doesn't really matter. Often you see that dominant, submissive relationship in those kind of situations where what we have is an intimate relationship that's not equal. And some cultures, and I am now being culturally specific, that's what they know and that's what they will always know and that's what they accept. And I'm not here to be disrespectful of that in any way, shape or form. I'm just saying that if you are living in a relationship where you do want to see the equality and understand what a good relationship is, very often women don't live in those. They struggle to be assertive and have their say, to be able to put their foot forward and stand up for what they want, but not in an aggressive way, in a really, assertive and calm way. I think that's the important thing, assertive and calm as opposed to angry and shrill, Or if not angry and shrill, what a lot of women do is they sulk or they become passive aggressive. And passive aggressive will never work. Whichever way we try and land, passive aggressive behavior is very childlike in relationships. Essentially, aggressive behavior, passive behavior, and the combination of passive aggressive are what we call childlike behaviors. The only type of behavior to have as a woman in good relationships is to be assertive, because things aren't going to work all the time, but you want the relationship to work. So you have to, at times, stand up for what you want. And you have to be very, very committed to what it is that you need. 1 out of 5 women in Australia experience domestic violence in their relationship. As I said, I've been working domestic violence for a long time. I think that that's higher, much higher. And we talk about domestic violence, and most people think, well, that's, the hitting and the swearing at and the belittling. It's more than that. So you've got financial violence, you've got sexual violence, you've got social violence, spiritual violence even, where you've got one dominant person over somebody who's more submissive. And I think what's really interesting with that statistic is that domestic violence is 5 different types or 6 different types of violence. And even, for example, if you think about emotional abuse, emotional violence, she is not subject to the hitting and the hurting physically. But very often, ladies, to get over emotional violence can take a lifetime. And they often say, physical violence is just the bruises going away, whereas emotional violence is there forever. So I think that 1 in 5 is probably a bit low. The interesting thing about that particular statement is that many women accept it. They stay in relationships. Often they don't know that they're in a relationship that's dysfunctional and doesn't work, or they do deep down but deny it, or they just are happy to stay in it. It's really very, very strange in many ways, but I'm not going to go into the theory of that with you tonight. I really just want to talk about what does constitute a good relationship. Problem number 1 I often see is that women are often unsure how to resolve issues in their relationship. And we get into a dance. So ladies, a dance, we call it the dance of a relationship, is a particular style or pattern, if you like, a dance in which couples get. And the dance of a relationship, interestingly, is actually established in the first 6 to 12 months of a relationship. And so often they're dysfunctional where, if we argue, we always end the argument in the same way. So that could be we don't, talk for the next 6 weeks, or we ignore each other. And generally those patterns of relating, and if you think about your, intimate relationships, if you really think about it, those patterns of when you disagree with each other have been around since you first met each other. So we talk a lot about the patterns or the dance of relationships, but women are very passive generally in relationships. So many times if I'm speaking at a conference or if I'm training or teaching, I ask the question, so how many of you are passive in relationships? And if I tell you in a room of 100, 90 would stand up. How many of you are aggressive? Probably 10 or 20 would. So generally women tend to be more passive, although some can be aggressive. And then, of course, the other one is passive-aggressive. So that is that, what I say that means or looks like is I'm going to get you. So I'm passive to your face, but there's always the undertones around I'm not going to cook the dinner properly, or I'll burn the shirt. Or you might say, is that really? Yep, it really happens. It really happens. Raising issues never works. So often what happens with women is that they don't anymore. What's the point, Karen? Because nothing's going to change. We've had the same conversation time and time again, and so I don't even raise it anymore. And I think in that way there's kind of this rolling over of, well, there's this fatigue about I don't want to try anymore because there is no point. And I do get that, because sometimes we've got to learn which wars to win and which battles to lose. But I think if those things that you're walking away from are really important to you, then on some level you're not fighting for what you want in the relationship, and that becomes a problem for you over time. Because what happens over time is that, there's increased resentment and frustration that builds up and up and up. And often over time it just means divorce or separation, or, we have this huge fight and your partner doesn't know where it comes from. It comes from your frustration of being built up over time. Often things don't get better. So what happens, again, over time, you feel afraid to raise issues, so you don't. You lack confidence and belief at times in yourself or in the relationship or in those around you. So either two, you don't resolve them and they fester, or you do and they're not resolved. So, sometimes we can't resolve things, but sometimes we can. And I guess my challenge this evening is for all of you on the line, are you in a pattern of relating with your partner that doesn't always work? Are there things that you could do better? Do you think that you could improve the way that you deal with the relationship? What are the things that you do well, or what are the things that you can do better? And that's what I was talking to you just now about, the dance of your relationship. So, when you say something and they say something, and you say something and they say something. And it's so interesting to see how the dance is, as I said, often established within the first 6 to 12 months of a relationship. A problem number 2 with women, I don't feel valued enough. This is so often I hear. I seem to be the one working hard in this relationship. I put in more than I get out. I always give and feel my partner and others keep taking. So, excuse me, what you have here is she is giving and she is providing and she is nurturing and she is looking after others. So others come first. And I think that's a really important point. When we talk about love, trust, and safety in relationships, can I just turn that very briefly, please, to the relationship that we have with ourselves? So, do you tend to be giving more to others than you give to yourself? Do you tend to make sure everybody else is okay and you are looked after last? I've just been running a 3-day carers retreat for one of the large organizations, and there were 20 carers on this retreat, which was really interesting. And they are all carers of people with Alzheimer's and dementia. And when we started the retreat, which is so classic of carers, what was interesting is that all of them get up in the morning and their whole life is spent looking after this person for whom they care. By the end of the retreat, I was having spoken to them on various occasions about, as women, we really have to start thinking about us, our lives, how well we are, and putting ourselves first. Because if we don't put ourselves first, well, I can tell you nobody else will. And so when we talk about having great relationships with other people, work colleagues, children, and even our partner, that's all well and good. But I really believe that great relationships start with the relationship we have with ourselves. And if it's not good, I can tell you it's not going to be great with others around us. And very often I do hear, I don't feel valuable around here. Well, that might be the case, but how valuable are you to you? And I see a lot of women who don't put themselves first, and ultimately they feel as if they walked over and actually on some level not treated particularly well. So when they don't feel valuable, it makes them feel sad or bad. I had a lot of those. I want to write a book, Sad or Bad, one day. They get angry, and often angry inside. They sulk or become passive aggressive, and they're miserable a lot of the time. So it's about what are we going to do about that, and how can we turn these things around? And if somebody else is making you sad or bad or feel sulky, what is it about that behavior that makes you feel that way? Because it says to me that there's not a lot of love or trust in it, or that it's become, as I said again, imbalanced. So what are we going to do about getting the balance back? This is a classic one that I find, problem number 3, I don't feel good about myself. And ultimately, if you don't feel good about yourself, it's really hard for you to feel good in a relationship. Because, I often have this particular topic. I was teaching some students not that long ago. And a lot of relationships where people go and found, partner, I want to find somebody, who completes me. I want to find somebody who will love me. And whenever I hear the word completes me, or, who will help me feel good about me, it basically tells me that I'm working with somebody who doesn't feel good about themselves. Now, if you've got a woman who doesn't feel good about herself and goes to find somebody who will complete her, it often means that you've got 2 halves making a whole, right? Or you would think. So she doesn't feel great, he or she doesn't feel great, the partner, and so they come together looking for solace and happiness in each other. And I think this is a really, really key point. You cannot find happiness in another person, ladies. The only person for whom or in whom you can find happiness is you. once you are happy and you are confident and you feel good about you and you actually like you and the relationship that you have with you, only really at that time can you start feeling great in a relationship with another human being. And so when we talk about I don't feel good about myself, the person with whom I'm most in conflict, very often women tell me, is me. I never know what to say, often either with my partner or in social gathering, and certainly not at work and in meetings. Oh no, I don't say anything. I'd rather say nothing because I've got nothing to say, which really isn't true. I question myself all the time, and I often feel anxious and uptight. So what you then got is a kind of ongoing situation whereby they're not happy, and that then has ramifications around low confidence, low self-esteem, lack of self-belief. And ultimately then you get people, or women, I'm talking about women here obviously, who may feel frustrated or anxious or uptight a lot of the time. So if that's any of you, you're welcome to shoot me a question or an email. But there would be some of you on the line tonight who would absolutely understand this slide. Am I happy in my relationship? Maybe it's time to really work out what you do want. You know, what do I want from my life? What type of relationship do I want to have? How can I improve it? It's not only they who have to change, so must I. This is a key outcome from this webinar. So often I will hear him say, or she will say, well, if you gave me more money, I would be happy. And he will say, well, if she gave me more sex, I would leave her alone. So notice if she or if he, in other words, my happiness is dependent on what he or she does. And as soon as your happiness is dependent on what somebody else does, it leaves you in a very, very vulnerable place. What I mean by that is coming back to the comment I made earlier. The only true happiness I believe we can find really in life is within ourselves, to look deep within ourselves and have this overarching sense of contentment about our lives and accepting that we're not perfect. We have warts and we have bad days and good days, but to accept ourselves and like ourselves overall. But to expect our partner to change and then we will be happy is a very dangerous and vulnerable ledge on which to launch our relationship, because it means then that if they don't live up to your expectations in any way, shape or form, your happiness is dependent on that. And I think that is a dangerous place to be. I think this is a really key point, is that relationships take a lot of work. They're hard work. Often I laugh when I see, women who look great before they get married, really kind of take time out to groom themselves and to look good, and sort of 5 or 10 years into the relationship, they're walking around in tracker dackers and Ugg boots and curlers in their hair. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think what the point I'm trying to make is that it finishes you mean to start, ladies. I think that's a really good point. Take care of yourself, look good, feel good about yourself. Relationships take work, and I don't think that we, if possible, should slacken off in working at them, because, I think about I have a 23-year-old son. I have 3 children. My most difficult child, I would say, excuse me, is my 23-year-old. And the reason why I share that with you is that he's quite, gritty at times. I never kind of know. He can swing either way in terms of he can be quite moody and a bit brittle. So with him, I always have to think about what I say and how I say it, whereas with my other 2, it seems to be easier or more relaxed. And I often think to myself about this child, working or having a relationship with him is so critically important to me, but it takes work. And whenever I think then about so many intimate relationships, they shouldn't be any different. We need to constantly nurture our relationships. We need to make sure that our marriages, our intimate relationships are, thriving. And if they're not thriving, then we need to be able to put strategies in place to help them thrive, and not to expect the other person to be, the soul of all the relationship magic or the soul of all the relationship bad things, because a relationship takes 2 to tango. I remember the day I first, the day I remember started loving working with women. I was working with Jessie. She was 24. She was in a very distant relationship. She came to see me. She really had little confidence, beautiful young woman, but just very meek. And I remember thinking, wow, she would be the most amazing, amazing dynamo if she had more confidence. And being with her partner at the time did not help. He was quite demeaning of her. He would put her down. And this is interesting because this was the state, the state of their dance was that when they first got together, she was an introvert, he was an extrovert, but when they first got together, he would jokingly, play with her, etc., etc. But what happened over time is that became their norm. So it became their norm in such a way that that's what happened in their relationship over time, and it made her absolutely miserable. She felt undervalued and weepy when she came to see me. She was not a happy girl. But we worked it out, and I gave her some skills, and you gave her some of the strategies to really think about what it is that she wants in her relationship and how she needs to go about getting what it is that she wants. And she's finished her degree. She loves her job as a teacher, which is what she wanted to do. And ultimately, she's living the happy life. Her relationship is better. I think it'll be a relationship that she's always going to have to work at. But anyway, she has turned it around. But most important is that her relationship with herself is fabulous. She's a lot more confident. She's a lot happier. She just seems a different girl, and I'm very happy for her. So what does a fantastic relationship look like? I mean, look, at the end of the day, I would love to be able to talk to you a lot longer about this than I can. But, that's a one-day workshop or a two-day workshop. But there's some key things I think that are really key here. Equality. I've been going on about that for a bit tonight, but equality, classically in the traditional relationship, she stays at home and looks after the kids, he goes to work. Well, the interesting thing, ladies, is that more now than ever before, families have dual incomes. In other words, she's out working and he's out working. And in the majority of the relationships I see or that I work with, she goes out to work, comes home and continues to work. And he comes home and doesn't necessarily, or the partner comes home and doesn't necessarily help with her. In other words, she's doing two jobs and her partner's doing one. So it could be, as I say, same-sex relationships or, male and female. But what I'm saying is that generally she's at home, she's at work doing the work, and she still comes home and does the work. So inequality becomes a problem in relationships, where if one partner is doing much more than the other, often over time what happens is that resentment builds. Ongoing sensitive communication. And what I mean about that is that they can talk about things. They're able to work through issues and talk a lot about emotions and how they feel about things. There isn't this distancing in the relationship. There's this heartfelt connection, this heartfelt discussion around things that really both make them happy and they struggle with. They're able to resolve issues well. They might not resolve issues right there and then in the heat of the moment. It might be a couple of hours or even a few days whilst, emotions kind of calm down. But overall, they talk things through and they resolve them. I want to tell you that you will never resolve issues if they are swept under the carpet. So many relationships I see or still work with will be, well, we just didn't discuss the problem, Karen. It's kind of we've moved on from it. Yeah, you've moved on from it temporarily, ladies. But it's there. And I'll tell you something, if it doesn't come up in 5 days or 5 months or 5 years, there's a good chance it's still under the carpet and it will resurface. Intimacy. Now, again, I'm talking about different kinds of intimacy. I'm certainly talking about emotional intimacy, where we're honest and we can share our deepest, darkest fears and thoughts and happinesses and joys and excitement. Intimacy is also sexual intimacy, where, we're committed to each other physically and sexually, and we're comfortable with that. And by the way, in intimacy, I'm also talking about monogamy, unless you are interested in a three-way relationship, and some people are. There's no criticism there. But if you're not, then monogamy has to be part of a highly effective relationship. It's very difficult to come back from an affair in a relationship. Very often because an affair is generally clandestine, and therefore the third person in a relationship, it's very hard to recover from. Possible? Absolutely. a regular occurrence? Absolutely not. And then fun, enjoyment, things that we like doing together and things that we look forward to, going on holiday, going to a dance class, attending movies, just to enjoy each other. And I see little of that or less of that these days maybe. And part of it, I think, is because of the rate of the world in which we live today, the fast pace of just generally living, I think the internet has changed our world. I just think it's a different place. So for all of these things that I've actually got on this slide, I think we have to build those factors into our daily relationships. I have to factor fun in with my partner. I have to factor in a bit of downtime with them. I have to make sure that we do things together and equally. All of these things are important. And, if you've got equality, this ongoing sense of communication, we resolve issues and we're intimate, but there's no fun, it kind of becomes heavy. Or if there's all of those other things but not intimate, often women will say, well, I feel as if I'm living with my friend, but I don't, feel close to this person anymore. So that's why I've included all of those 5. Solutions to the problem number 1, work out how to resolve your problems. So what does it look like? Equal sharing of the workload. What is it like now? Well, often she'll say, I feel overloaded. Learning what a good relationship looks like. I think that's really key. I've given you the 5, but obviously there's many, many more. And I'm going to encourage all of you to go and do the Be Unstoppable program, and learning what a good relationship looks like is in there. So it actually explains to you what a good relationship looks like and how to achieve one. Implement strategies to get it right. So coaching, counseling. Very often in relationships, I'm thinking about a good friend of mine. So he's been in a relationship for about 10 years and it's really struggled all along. They're separated and they've just reconciled. And let's call him John. I said, John, first it was really interesting. He didn't tell me that he had or they had separated. I don't know them that well. And when I spoke to him last week, he said, we've just come back together after 6 months apart. And I said, I'm really sorry and happy, really sorry. You separated, but happy that you're together. And I said to him, so what have you done to kind of move on from why you separated? He said, well, I just think we're going to try harder. And generally, I think that's a lovely thing to think about, ladies, but try harder isn't going to get your relationship back. And the reason behind that is because very often relationships fall apart because we're using strategies or dysfunctional ways of being that hurt the relationship. So time apart, whilst it will be good to kind of think things through and maybe, decide to do it better, it's not going to change it. You've got to know how to use different strategies, and that can only really be done through coaching or counseling, et cetera, and to find a coach to teach and guide you. But first, for things to change, I must change. So problem number 2, I don't feel valued. So learn what a good relationship looks like, as I said. Get help, because very often to just say, well, go and, realize that you do have a lot of value or important, that's not enough. We women need to be able to share our soul with somebody. We need to be able to have a confidant or an ally, and we need to be able to be taught what to do or what to say, because if we had been taught before, we would have been doing those things. And we're not doing those things because often we don't know how to do them. So we need somebody to help us walk the road. Learn all about the skills to have a good relationship, as I said earlier. I don't feel good about myself. Get help to understand why this is. Generally, when people don't feel good about themselves, as women, often we were children who didn't feel good about ourselves, but not always. Jess actually, when I said earlier she came to see me, she always put herself down. She had a low self-esteem, and she was quite quiet, but what had her lack of self-esteem prevented her from doing? She said being a teacher. I worked with Jess for 7 months. We did lots of role plays. I gave her lots of things to do. I taught her things around, self-belief, but also how she is in relationships. And as I said earlier, she did a degree, and she's now a qualified high school teacher. So the point that I also make is that if things aren't working for you, there's things you can do about it in both your own personal lives or in your relationships with others. And if you're struggling, go and seek help. Don't sit there and struggle one moment longer. This is my lovely Viv Allenson. So Viv Allenson, she was the coach. Sorry, she was the CEO, coached in 2017. and she was really fantastic. She was the CEO of the year, and she's in aged care. And she and I worked together for about a year and a half, and she's just the most phenomenal woman. And she believes that coaching, it doesn't necessarily have to be anybody, me, could be anybody, but coaching changed her life. So there you go. 7 strategies of good relationships. Take care of you because you are important. Maintain and respect each other's individuality. So both of you have fun times apart, but fun times together. You express how you feel about things and each other in an assertive way, not aggressive, attacking, or, passive aggressive of saying things but doing other things. You take a keen interest in your own activities and those of your partner. So if you want to go and, play netball and he wants to go and play with the cars, then so be it. You don't have to go and play with the cars all the time. Neither does he have to come to the netball. There are no secrets. This is a key thing, no secrets. It's when secrets come or secrets start becoming more important in relationships that often struggles come. Fight fairly, no backhanded or underhanded comments, and you build your relationship on give and take. So those are really 7 key aspects of love, trust, and safety in relationships. So the Be Unstoppable program, if you wanted to register, that is where you register. These are the 9 stages. As I say, came out of my experience earlier with women, but number 1 is all about personal empowerment, taking control of your life. Second stage is your story, you really matter. It's all about you as a woman and why you are important and how you can live this wonderfully productive life. The third stage is trust, love, and safety. So exactly this topic tonight is one of the topics in the program. Fourth is women in business and how to be able to be, have a voice in business and to be heard in business. Managing stress as a woman in a challenging world, not work, challenging world. So how to manage our stress as women, particularly because we've got so much on our plates and so much to do. 6 is about communicating effectively and assertively. I'm really, really key on this because I think this is where a lot of women struggle. And I think this is one of the areas that we need to really get better and be better at as females in the world today. It doesn't matter at work, at home, in the business world, out in the supermarket, to be able to hold our ground. 7, to know what emotional intelligence really is and how to be emotionally intelligent. And to understand that often it's the emotions that we have that can either make a situation work for us or a situation work against us. So emotional intelligence is all about managing your emotions well in all different situations. And I think we don't always do that well, which is why it's number 7. 8, real resilience, bouncing forward as a woman. I think women generally are resilient, but not always. So this is all about what is resilience, how to be resilient, resilient thinking, and strategies to put in place to bounce forward when life is tough. And the last one is goal setting. So creating the dream life you really want. Now, we launched this a month ago, as I said, and we've got about 1,400 women going through, I think. And it's really, as I said, from what I explained earlier, it's written for women around the world. And this is essentially my gift to females. Empowering women to thrive, so I've just explained about that. Empowering women to thrive at work is 12 topics. So what organizations do is bring us in to run some of these topics for women in their organization. We run retreats, readings, articles, blogs about women, monthly webinars, coaching, etc. The Empowering Women to Thrive program has been going for probably about 6 years now, take you from this to this. That sense of self-love, self-belief, and confidence. I just wanted to tell you a little bit, if you wanted to do the online program, so the online program is at the moment on this particular page at $297, including GST. However, if you decided to go onto this program, you can get a 15 or 14% off, and the code, if you want to write the code, is THRIVE, THRIVE 2018, Thrive 2018. So the program would be about $260, I think, for the 9-stage program. It's about 60 hours of program and its activities, blogs, journals, YouTubes. It's just a really, really interactive program. And as I always say, if not for you, then for your sister, mother, friend, aunt, neighbor, one woman at a time. And if you wanted to join it, www.empoweringwomentothrive.com. Welcome to spend 30 minutes talking to me if you would like anything. You can either email me, or what you will be able to have the opportunity to do, and there's only 5 of you I can work with. What you will get tomorrow is probably Rachel. My Rachel will send you a link, and on the link you will have the opportunity to book some time with me if you would like over the next couple of days. If you would like to have some guidance or just want to talk about things, want help in business, resilience, about you, about your relationships, it doesn't really matter. So, yeah, I really hope that you've had the opportunity, ladies, to really think about love, trust, and safety in relationships. Are there any questions that any of you may have of me now? Okay, so I have what do I regard as the most important skill to use in conflict resolution? It's a really good question, but I would answer probably emotional intelligence, that when things are hot in the kitchen, that you're able to keep calm, that you're able to manage your emotions even though you are angry and frustrated. I always say to my children, to the people I train or teachers, that she who remains calm wins. I'll just say that again. She who remains calm wins. So if you are able to remain calm, even though you could be really angry, those are the women who generally walk away having won the conflict. And I think that's a really, really critical skill. And that is in the Be Unstoppable program. That is topic number 7, you, the emotionally intelligent woman. So I just want you to know how much I've enjoyed working with you this evening, ladies. Thank you so much for coming online. It's been absolutely wonderful working with you, and I really hope to be able to talk with you shortly and to just get to know you a little bit better. So Rachel will be in touch, and please feel free to go on Unstoppable. And as I say, use the Thrive 2018 code to get a discount. And if not for you, then send it through to your family, your friends, your sisters, your aunts, and your mothers. So God bless, and until next month, take care, and I'll speak soon. Bye.